The climate crisis is growing rapidly. I was reading this morning, the U.S. experiences 10 to 15 parts per million particulate matter in normal airflow. China, 700 parts per million particulate matter on a normal day. If that's not a crisis, I don't know what is.
That's a crisis.
But guess which way the wind blows, folks? You get it first. I live in Texas, we get it later. But it's a world without borders. Mm-hmm. So the climate crisis, I was just in Saudi Arabia last week. They're desperate for water. 98% of the water they consume is desalinated water because they would have to go too deep into the earth to get natural well water. There have been drought for tens of thousands of years in their part of the Middle East. And so, it wasn't always that way, but it is now. You may say, well, that was all pre-industrial, et cetera. Yes, it was. But what do we do in the next 100 years in Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, pays 18 cents a gallon for gasoline? So the crisis is real. The crisis is now. The problem we hit head on, folks, from my point of view, which I do write about, we have a political process and a political system and elected officials who think in 2-year intervals and can't think past 2-year intervals. That is their life. And whether they are a 4-year representative, like a governor, or if they are a 6-year representative, like a senator, they still think in 2-year intervals because the system changes. Now, I, as a citizen, would not want to give up my 2-year accountability assessment of how they're doing. That's constitutional. But we have to somehow find a mechanism to go beyond the 2-year cycle if we're going to deal with the crisis. It's not a crisis obvious every minute, but it's growing, it's getting worse. And whether it's an energy availability crisis, which we could find ourselves in one day if we manage this poorly, or an environmental disaster of land, water, air, which is growing by the year, accumulating in the atmosphere, accumulating in the oceans, accumulating in landfills, we've got to come to grips with this. And the political process won't allow it, I'm afraid.